I only have Maria. So, please divorce me. David said this with a solemn expression. I couldn't respond to him immediately. I wanted to say, let's try again, or don't leave me. That's how much I still loved David. All right, I understand. Those were the only words I could manage to say. And so, we divorced. After that, I began living alone with my son. What? Why now? One day, I received a letter from David, who had chosen his mistress over me. He had passed away in a car accident a month ago. Yet, I received a letter from him and read it, feeling suspicious. If I were to. The contents were shocking to me. No way, it can't be true. After reading it, I started shaking. And then, I made a certain decision. I am Julia, a 32-year-old ordinary working wife. I have an older husband, David, and a son named Rick. Julia, you're really good at being considerate. Huh? Well, you discreetly portion out the food, move the plates to the side, and call the waiter at just the right moment. I met David at a group date a friend dragged me to. I've always been bad at asserting myself, so I often ended up just listening. That time, too, while everyone else was having a great time, I was in the background helping out when David approached me. Are you bored? Not really, but I'm not good at talking. I see. Oh, did you try this dish? It's really good. David was always considerate and smiling. Thanks to him, I managed to enjoy the matchmaking party. If you don't mind, can we exchange contact info? We exchanged contact information and quickly became close. After a few years of dating, we got married. He confessed his feelings to me, and we started dating. This baby is so adorable. How about naming him Rick? I think that's a great idea. Nice to meet you, Rick. Soon after our marriage, I gave birth to Rick. David was the one who named him. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. I'm so happy, thanks to you. He was smiling as he said it. Nodding and smiling back, I'd say, I'm happy too, thanks to you, David. I believed from the bottom of my heart that this happiness would last forever. Mom, I finished my homework. Oh, you're already done? That's amazing. Rick is very bright, just like David. He's diligent with his studies, always doing his homework without being told and often asking David for help with his studies. We are very proud of our son. However, not everyone is fond of Rick. David's parents, in particular, don't think highly of him. Rick doesn't look much like David. I wonder whose child he really is. My mother-in-law seems to dislike that Rick resembles me. Every time we visit, she makes snide remarks to Rick. What are you talking about? That's right. Rick is definitely my son. If you keep saying things like that, I won't come here anymore. Both David and I never tolerated my mother-in-law's words. Since she values David, she would apologize, saying, I didn't mean any harm. I'm sorry. But every time we visited, she would say the same things, so she clearly hadn't learned her lesson. And father-in-law. He's a boy but so weak and spineless. Rick's grandfather didn't like that Rick preferred studying indoors to playing outside. Lately, Rick had been using a tablet for studying, and when he played with it in the corner of the room, his grandfather would try to snatch it away, saying, fooling around with that thing all the time will make you stupid. Times have changed, Dad. Rick is using that to study. You can't study on a slab like that. It's just like the smartphone you and Mom use. When I was a kid, you told me to stay in and study, but now you're telling Rick to go outside and play? What's with that? Apparently, when David was a child, his father kept him inside to study all the time. Of course, spending all day on the tablet isn't ideal. But Rick often played outside with his friends. There were no kids near his grandparents' house, and without a yard to play in, he prioritized studying instead. I'm really sorry. My parents don't like that I married you, Julia. It seems David's parents wanted him to marry another woman. She was an old childhood friend of David's and the daughter of a well-known local company's president. She always loved David, and he married a woman like this. Enough! I love Julia and Rick with all my heart. Stop disappointing me. We gradually distanced ourselves from his parents and rarely visited them now. However, they sometimes showed up unannounced or waited for Rick on his way home from school. Just ignore them if they come. I work from home and am usually inside. His parents knew this and would pound on the door or shout loudly, causing me stress. This behavior even led to the neighbors calling the police once, so they usually left quickly. Despite this, I always ignored them and wondered aloud, why are they so obsessed? I accompany Rick to and from school, staying alert for his grandparents. My parents are also concerned, and so far, no incidents have occurred. Nevertheless, it's natural to worry. Maybe we should move closer to your parents, David suggested, prompting us to consider relocating. Moving costs are a burden, but if it means peace of mind, we were searching for a new home. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. Could it be someone from work? At first, I was cautious of the unfamiliar number, but after several calls, I decided to answer. Hello? Finally, you answered. Took you long enough, you fool. A woman's voice insulted me right away. Frowning, I debated whether to hang up. Who is this? If you don't have a reason, I'm hanging up. Wow, so cheeky. I'm Maria Kirkland, David's future wife. What? What is this person talking about? I wondered, debating whether to hang up. If this is a prank, I'm hanging up. It's the truth. I'm David's childhood friend, and I'm going to marry him. Her words reminded me that David once mentioned his childhood friend Maria. Maria is selfish and not my type at all, he had said before. Could this Maria on the phone be that childhood friend? If so, why was she calling me? These questions ran through my mind, and I stayed silent. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm listening. What about this childhood friend? It's obvious, isn't it? David belongs to me. Divorce him now. Her voice conveyed contempt even over the phone. How much does this woman look down on me? Sorry, but no. David and I love each other. That's only for now. He just wanted to have fun before marrying me. So don't get cocky. Now I understood why David didn't like her. Talking to this woman was pointless. Well, too bad. I'm busy with work. Goodbye, I said and hung up. She kept calling, but I ignored her. Eventually, she gave up, but then I received a message. How long do you think you can keep working after making an enemy of the Kirkland Group? A sense of dread filled me. The Kirkland Group, could it be that Kirkland? The Kirkland Group is a large company that runs multiple restaurants. The CEO's last name is indeed Kirkland, so Maria might be telling the truth. Of all people, it had to be the Kirkland Group. I have professional dealings with the Kirkland Group. Additionally, David had business ties with them. I need to discuss this with David right away. I immediately told David about Maria's call when he got home. David looked shocked. No way! Maria? David, are you all right? Seeing him clearly upset, I asked worriedly. He shook his head after a moment. I'm fine. Leave her to me, David said, trying to reassure me with a smile. Despite my uneasy feeling, I decided to trust him as usual. All right, I'm counting on you. David smiled, looking relieved. Whenever there was a problem, David would say, leave it to me, and always took care of it. So, I trusted him this time as well, but I would come to regret that decision. Is Dad going to be late again today? Seems like it. The next day, David started coming home late. He claimed it was due to working overtime during a busy period, but given the timing, I suspected it had something to do with Maria. However, David didn't tell me anything, leaving me to worry and wait. Hope he comes home soon. Yes, me too. Agreeing with Rick, I nodded, wishing for things to go back to how they were. A year later, everything changed. What? What are you saying? Maria is pregnant with my child. So, I want a divorce. David said this with a blank expression. I couldn't believe his words and just stared at him. My decision is final. I'll give you custody and this house, Julia. Don't be ridiculous. We were living in the new house we had carefully chosen after a year of consideration. This house was filled with our dreams and our precious son. The David I knew wouldn't give them up so easily. Reconsider. Tell me the truth. I demanded, but he wouldn't answer or even look at me. I won't sign the divorce papers until you tell me the truth. Fine. Then I'll go back to my parents' house. After that, David never returned to our new home and started living with his parents. His parents were ecstatic about this. They called me daily, saying, divorce him quickly and free David. But I was determined to know the truth. Julia, you need to let him go. However, the situation changed when my parents also supported the divorce. Until then, they had always supported me and believed in David. Their sudden change of heart shocked me. Why are you saying this too? I'm not convinced. Please, Julia. We don't want you to be unhappy. Persuaded even by my parents, I decided to divorce David. I'm sorry, Rick. We can't live with your dad anymore. I see. Rick said, looking a bit sad. Fortunately, my income was enough for the two of us to live comfortably. My parents would surely help as well. I'm okay. I can manage with just you, Mom. Hugging Rick as he smiled, I knew I had to be strong for him. I want to talk one last time before the divorce. All right. I'll come home once. I decided to meet David one last time. You look a bit worn out. Yeah, I've been busy. When I finally saw David again, he seemed exhausted, sighing repeatedly. As I said before, you can have the house in custody. So, you can easily abandon Rick. David's face showed a complex expression for a moment at my words. But he quickly reverted to a blank expression. I have another child to think about. Is that Maria's child? David averted his eyes this time. The David I knew never avoided eye contact in serious conversations. Was the David I loved gone? So, you don't need us anymore. That's right. Finally, David looked at me. I only have Maria. So, please divorce me. David said this with a solemn expression. I couldn't respond to him immediately. I wanted to say, let's try again, and don't leave me. That's how much I still loved David. All right, I understand. Those were the only words I could manage to say. And so, we divorced. Mom, you don't have to worry about anything. I'll protect you for Dad too. Thank you, Rick. Rick comforted me as I was feeling down. I realized I didn't need David anymore. As long as I had Rick, that was enough. I'm fine too. I'll make sure you're happy, Rick. I said, hugging him. And so, I decided to move on without David. After that, I began living alone with my son. What? Why now? One day, I received a letter from David, who had chosen his mistress over me. He had died in a car accident a month earlier. David was hit in a hit and run. He passed away at the scene, my father had told me. When I heard this, I felt very sad. Even though I decided to divorce him, I guess part of me still loved him. But he had chosen his childhood friend and mistress over me. So, I didn't attend his funeral. Why is this letter from David? Despite my suspicion, I read the letter. I'm really sorry for what I did to you and Rick. I'm truly sorry. The letter began with an apology. Seeing his familiar handwriting made me tear up. As I read further, I found myself saying, "What?" out loud. If I were to. What was written shocked me. No, this can't be true. I finished the letter, trembling. And then, I made a decision. I understand your feelings. But that doesn't change anything. Muttering to myself, I immediately took action. With feelings of I won't forgive you and I won't lose, I decided to move forward. I'm Julia McGuire, David's wife. I'd like to see the CEO. First, I headed to the headquarters of the Kirkland Group. At the reception desk, I asked to see Mr. Kirkland, the CEO. So, you are Julia. I'm sorry for your loss regarding David. Thank you, but more importantly, I recently received this. I handed David's letter to Mr. Kirkland. He took it, read its contents, and nodded. Everything written here is true. So, David. Yes, he never betrayed you and your son. Hearing these words clearly stated, I almost started to cry. Seeing my reaction, Mr. Kirkland stood up. I deeply apologize for everything that has happened. As he apologized sincerely, I wondered how such a sincere man could have raised such a woman. No matter how much he apologizes, David won't come back. If only they had acknowledged this sooner. I must also apologize for that. We are still gathering evidence, but... Mr. Kirkland continued with even more shocking revelations. Deep down, part of me had suspected this all along. I understand. I'm not here to blame you, but I need your cooperation. Please bring the evidence to me as soon as you have it. Of course. I will gather all the necessary evidence. Having made a firm promise with Mr. Kirkland, I began my preparations. I was determined to clear David's name and ensure happiness for Rick and me. Watch out, Maria. And those worthless parents of David. 3 days after meeting with Mr. Kirkland, I had gathered enough evidence and was ready to confront David's former in-laws. You'll be safe with me. Yes, thank you. I left Rick with my mother, who was waiting at home, and rang the doorbell at David's parents' house with my father by my side. Hello, who are you? A blonde woman with heavy makeup answered the door. So, this is Maria. The woman who took David from me. Nice to meet you. I'm Julia, and this is my father. Wait, you're that Julia? Maria stared at me and my father. What do you want? This house is mine now. I came to discuss something important. It's quite sad that you were kicked out of your mansion and now have to live in this shabby house. I said with a smile, watching as her face turned red with anger. In reality, after learning the truth about David, Mr. Kirkland had kicked her out of their mansion and disowned her. That's why she had no choice but to live in such an ordinary and inconvenient house. Don't get cocky. You've already been dumped. There's a lot to discuss, including that. For now, can we come in? My father spoke calmly, and she reluctantly let us in. Oh, look, it's the loser. What do you want now? David's parents were there too, and they looked puzzled to see me. I smiled at them. I'm here to talk about David. Now, it's time for payback. I was going to make them regret their actions. I received a letter from David recently. What? A letter from David? I handed them the letter I had shown to Mr. Kirkland. At first, David's parents and Maria frowned, but as they read further, their expressions changed. You didn't expect a letter revealing the truth to reach me after David's death, did you? The letter detailed their wrongdoings. You pressured David to marry her by any means necessary. Knowing Maria still liked David, his parents believed marrying the Kirkland Group heiress would benefit them. So, they pushed David to marry her. The letter states, every day my parents call, demanding I marry Maria. It disrupts my work, and I always feel judged. They called him day and night, even contacting his workplace if he didn't answer. As a result, David constantly felt ostracized. Still, David kept refusing your demands, saying, the only ones I love are Julia and Rick. Frustrated, you resorted to extreme measures. My father, who had heard about this from David while he was alive, glared at his parents. They had tried to persuade me to divorce David, respecting his wish to keep me out of the mess. Now that we knew the full truth, my father had come with me to confront them. You pretended to give up, invited David over for a drink as father and son. Though wary, David decided to give them one last chance, thinking he'd sever ties if anything happened. At their house, they plied David with alcohol until he was thoroughly drunk. Once David was completely drunk, you called Maria over and created a situation that couldn't be denied. David, blackout drunk, had no memory of any infidelity. But just the fact that he spent the night with another woman haunted him. Feeling he couldn't escape Maria and wanting to protect us, he brought up divorce. What you didn't expect was Mr. Kirkland disowning Maria upon learning the truth. Kicked out of her family home, Maria moved into David's parents' house. She planned to live off David's income, but then he died in the accident. To push your own son to such extremes for your gain. You're not parents, shame on you. My father continued to glare at them as he spoke. So what? The fact is, David chose me. Yes, but only because you claimed to be pregnant. I looked at Maria's belly. There were no signs of pregnancy, making her claim doubtful. It seems you went to great lengths to get David. She had used her status as the president's daughter to pressure David's company. David was under scrutiny from his colleagues because they were being intimidated by a large corporation. On top of that, you ambushed David after work every day. Maria had waited for David outside his office every day. To avoid her, David often worked late and took detours, which made him come home late. I was only expressing my feelings to David. Your feelings? Did you just want a man who wouldn't fall for you easily? My words made Maria flinch. David had realized how Maria felt about him and wrote about it in his letter. She thinks all men belong to her. She's obsessed with me because I treat her coldly. There's no love there. That's not true. I've always loved David. Oh, really? Then why do you seem to enjoy playing around so much? As I spoke, I showed her several photos. The photos depicted Maria getting cozy with different men. This. I can explain. And David told you, didn't he? He said he couldn't love someone who took his happiness and might not even be carrying his child. David was the one at fault. He rejected me coldly even after I confessed my feelings. So, you arranged the car accident, didn't you? At that moment, a cold voice rang out, Mr. Kirkland's. Why? Why do I hear my father? Maria looked around in confusion, then noticed the phone in my hand. I asked Julia to connect the call today, Mr. Kirkland said. Why did you disown me, Dad? It's only natural to disown a daughter who ruins lives and becomes a criminal. His voice over the phone was chillingly cold, not at all like one speaking to his child. David had been consulting me for some time. He was planning to bring me proof of Maria's infidelity and her setup. But on the way, he had the accident and never returned. He got what he deserved for betraying me. It's your fault. You pushed him into the road while he was waiting at the crosswalk, not realizing you were there. David, caught off guard, didn't notice Maria and ended up stepping into the street, leading to the fatal accident. Then he was hit and killed in the hit and run. He was such a good person. Your selfishness cost him his precious life. How do you know all this, Dad? Because I was on the phone with David at that time. David had called Mr. Kirkland to inform him that he was on his way over. That's how Mr. Kirkland knew about the accident. He heard David exclaim, Maria, over the phone. That's why I collected evidence of your crimes as a final atonement. Even you, Dad, are betraying me. You were the one who betrayed our trust first. With that, he ended the call. Maria kept calling out, Dad. Dad, to the now silent phone. Mr. Kirkland has already submitted the evidence to the police. It's only a matter of time before you're arrested. No, this can't be. Maria collapsed to her knees. The sirens of a police car coming to take her away echoed in the background. Maria was arrested and eventually sentenced to prison. I don't care. I still have David's inheritance. With that, I can. Sorry, but you won't be getting David's inheritance. Maria mumbled to herself before being taken away by the police. I smiled at her and said, "What? But I'm David's. I'm David's wife." We never filed the divorce papers. David had a signed divorce paper, but he never submitted it to the city office. I know I need to set Julia free, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. The divorce papers had been sent along with his letter. So, David and I were still legally married. His inheritance will go to me and Rick, his wife and son. You and those toxic parents of yours won't get a single cent, I declared, and Maria started screaming incomprehensibly in a fit of rage. Just as she tried to attack me, the police arrived and took her away. Julia, we were also threatened by her. Yes, that woman told us to interfere between her and David. Seeing Maria taken away, David's parents started sucking up to me. I glared at them. Because of you, I lost my beloved husband, and Rick lost his only father. You betrayed David, who trusted you as parents until the very end and tried to take care of you. That's right. Rick is our grandson, David's only legacy. David's father suddenly raised his voice, and I gave him a cold look. Rick is the only one carrying David's blood. So, give Rick to us. Yes. He's our grandson. I understood their intentions. They wanted to take Rick to get their hands on David's inheritance and have someone take care of them in their old age. You think I'll hand over my precious child with David to you? That's right. Children are not tools for your convenience. We yelled back at them and left the house. Later, I heard through the grapevine that the police presence in our argument had caused the neighbors to start watching the house closely. The couple was already known for being troublesome, and now they were constantly whispered about. They're reaping what they sowed with their own son. Mom, did you say something? Nothing, honey. I was just thinking about what to make for dinner tonight. I didn't care about those people anymore. From now on, I'd live for Rick. I stroked Rick's head and made up my mind. After being released from prison, Maria reportedly sought refuge with David's parents. But they wouldn't accept her. They had a big fight at the front door, and she was left feeling ostracized again. Maria was kicked out by both her parents and David's parents, eventually disappearing into the night. Well, she's still fairly attractive. I hope she works hard to pay off the alimony she owes me. And it turns out her pregnancy was a lie too. I'm relieved there's no unfortunate child involved. The troublemaking in-laws eventually sold their house and moved. My father hired a detective to investigate, and it turns out, they caused trouble even in their new neighborhood and caught the attention of some unsavory characters. Those two will never know happiness. I see, I'm glad. Knowing the outcome of those villains, I felt true peace of mind. A few years later. Okay, I'm off. Take care. Don't stay out too late. I know, Mom. I smiled as I saw Rick off to school. Rick had grown up and was now in high school. He still loved studying and had grown into a kind young man who always looked out for me. Dad made me promise to protect you if anything happened. When he started middle school, Rick shared this with me. Before we separated, Rick had a long talk with David. David had told him to protect me if he were no longer around. So, I've decided to protect you for Dad too. Seeing Rick smile as he spoke, I remembered David's letter. If I can never come back to you and Rick, please forget about me and live happily. There's no need for revenge. David had cared about us until the end, his final wish for us not to seek revenge. Although I couldn't fulfill that wish, I didn't regret it. The actions I took back then led to our current happiness. I felt at peace with myself. My parents continued to support Rick and me, and Mr. Kirkland, perhaps out of guilt, also helped us financially. You know, I'm learning about business from Mr. Kirkland. Oh, really? My dream is to take over his company someday. Rick spoke of his future with a smile. I planned to watch over him warmly. Please watch over us too. I spoke to the photo in the living room. In the photo, David was smiling, and I felt as if he gently nodded in agreement.